Overlooking Westminster Abbey this morning is veteran broadcaster, royal historian Wesley Kerr. It's wonderful to see you here this morning. It's such a historic day, isn't it? Because it was a historic moment 80 years ago.
And there's the bells of the Abbey ringing out. So, as they will, the bells on VE Day, all over the country, church bells rang for the first time since the victory at El Alamein. They'd be silenced through the war. Everybody's house had a blackout all through the war. So, after 2,000 nights of darkness, the next night people didn't have to have their blackout. So if today we can recapture some of the astonishing spirit of VE Day in 1945, that'll be very remarkable, because, of course, it's the last time that we will have survivors from that era. But everybody that was alive, I was talking to my 91-year-old foster sister the other day, everyone was alive that day, says that perhaps the most remarkable day of their life. Noel Coward, who was in the crowds that day, then on the theatre in the evening, he said it was the most remarkable day in our history. But it actually began with a Wagnerian thunderstorm. So the Dean of Westminster, Alan Don, records in his diaries, as does the famous MP Chips Channon, that there was like a huge storm at the beginning of the day, and then crispness. And the other strange thing is there were no cars. There happened to be a bus strike, and people actually, for some reason, were... So the streets were, in fact, clear, except for tens of thousands of people. And this was absolutely the focus, really, the whole of central London, the parks, outside the palace, Whitehall, and there were an amazing number of things going on the day. So the King and Queen and the princesses made over half a dozen appearances on the balcony. Of course, famously, Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret went out among the crowds. Churchill made 4 speeches, starting, and we'll go through the sequence, but I think if some of that can be captured in the events of today, like the 2-minute silence, the service at the Abbey, which was an absolute focus then with services every hour, the events at Horse Guards, all of these attended by survivors from the era. I think there's a last chance to capture that astonishing VE Day spirit.
I get chills just listening to you, Wesley, because, I mean, 5 years earlier in 1940, what was described as the darkest hour, it looked like it was all going completely the other way, didn't it? And then Dunkirk and Winston Churchill rejected the idea of negotiating for peace. And, you know, we then had 5 years further of war and deprivation. It
was unremitting bad news, really, from the spring of 1940. And then, then the terrible Blitz, the Battle of Britain, which is commemorated in a special chapel at the Abbey. And as Churchill said on the day 45, that Britain was alone for a year. But it wasn't alone because there was the Empire and the Commonwealth. So the old dominions, which were independent, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and South Africa, they declared war almost simultaneously with Britain declaring war in September 1939. And millions and millions of troops volunteered from the dominions, from Africa, from the West Indies, from Canada. We had the Polish pilots, we had the Czech pilots. So yes, Britain was alone, and the Axis powers really controlled the whole of Europe, except for Spain and Switzerland and Portugal that were neutral. But for the fall of France, which was like a catastrophe, the evacuation, which was, I suppose, a small triumph from the jaws of disaster. But Churchill said in his most famous speech on VE Day, from a balcony about 200 yards away from here, of the Ministry of Health, that we'd been in the jaws of death, really, almost close to hell, and there'd been this astonishing deliverance. So I think that was the sense, that it had been almost a damn close thing, and Britain had looked like losing the war. But he said in that speech, London can take it, so that the country had been pulverised with tens of thousands of bombs. In the country, 2 million homes were destroyed, 1 million were destroyed in London. Just on one night of the Blitz, I think the 10th, 11th of May, 1940, nearly 1,500 people were killed in this area of central London. The Abbey itself was bombed, and the lantern, which is right in the middle of the Abbey, was open to the skies. The Dean thought that the Abbey would be lost. St Paul's actually was bombed, but they were incendiary bombs, and hundreds of people acted as fire watchers on the roofs of these great churches. But of course, Coventry Cathedral was lost. So there was so much suffering in that war, and I think it's between over 70 million people were killed worldwide, and it was in every continent, the war. So the feeling of relief and release on that day is astonishing, and it was felt throughout society.
I think whenever we remember what happened, it's important to reflect on the fact that we know now that it ended on the 8th of May 1945, but in the midst of war they had no idea how long this was going to go on for. So you talk, of course, about that, the word smithery of Winston Churchill. He was so good at rousing people's spirits, wasn't he, throughout the war, but particularly on that moment when he announced to the people of the UK that there was victory in Europe. It was the end of war in Europe, but it wasn't the end of the war, was it, Wesley?
Yes, people thought that defeating Japan might take another year or so. There was still enormous amount of fighting in Burma. The British Empire, as it were, in India had been threatened. And, of course, over 2 million Indians volunteered. Yes. Tens of thousands were killed. So that fighting was going on. People didn't realise that the work was going on with the atomic bombs, which, of course, were dropped on Japan on August the 6th and August the 9th, which precipitated the Japanese surrender. But there had just been this incredibly tumultuous series of events in the month leading up to VE Day. So I think the 12th of April, 1945, President Roosevelt, our great ally, dies. April the 28th, Mussolini dies. April the 30th, Hitler commits suicide. April the 15th, Bergen-Belsen is liberated by British and Canadian troops, and they find 60,000 people imprisoned there. They're so sick that 15,000 of them die. They find piles of skeletal bodies. So the full horrors of what the Nazis had been perpetrating became evident. So you've got these extraordinary conflicting emotions, and people seeing this in newsreels and getting the information that they'll have heard Churchill's speech on the radio. So I think there was a desire to sort of participate in the victory. Yes. And of course, many people, perhaps 1 million British forces, were still abroad serving. So yes, the victory had been achieved in Europe, but the war was not over. And, of course, there was a huge work of rebuilding Britain. Yeah. And, of course, actually, Churchill himself lost power within 2 months. Because in this process, democracy continued. So Churchill also went to the Commons that day and said, we've made mistakes and you've been here to criticise. The Commons, which had been bombed in the war, then all the MPs were led to a service behind us at St Margaret's, Westminster, through cheering crowds. It's a day which is really unforgettable, and it's a day when Britain is completely and totally united. And I suppose it shows what we can achieve when there's evil that's being fought and we set ourselves to do something. Together. And we must thank all the people from that time, a few of whom will be today celebrating at the events in the Abbey, at Horse Guards, the concert in Albert Hall. We'll never repeat this day. And those memories are incredibly powerful and almost they're coming to mind for those of us that weren't alive in that time, a baby boomer like myself. Well,
let's reflect on the testimony of one of those remarkable veterans now. The important role, of course, that each and every one of them played in fighting the war. People like Violet Clark, who enlisted into the Auxiliary Territorial Service back in 1943. She was just 17 years old. But she worked alongside the future Queen, Princess Elizabeth, as they prepped and maintained vehicles for frontline use. And here she is talking about the celebrations 80 years ago.
We all just followed and went up to London. Well, you can't describe this. The joys and the shock of seeing the Queen on the podium because she and I had been friends. Just doing the job that was needed. That was equipping vehicles for the front line. We used to leave messages, such things as, will you marry me? Or, will you come and see me? This is my address, and we always gave them a false address.
And let's hear from Patricia Outram. She joined the Wrens, officially known as the Women's Royal Naval Service, after she turned 18, and remembers an incredible moment. She crossed paths with Sir Winston Churchill while on watch in Dover.
Well, I joined the Women's Royal Naval Service, the Wrens as we were known. A number of us who had German worked shifts or watches, as they're called in the Navy, listening on the radio wavelengths of German ships to see if we could pick up any information about what they were planning to do and pass it on to naval intelligence. When I was stationed down near Dover at a station called Abbott's Cliff, was sitting reading my library book in a quiet bit of the cliffs, and I saw a little party of people coming up from the car park below, and very much to my surprise, the ones I think leading the party were the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and General Montgomery, I think. I just waved and said, hello, good morning, everybody. And they all waved back and said, hello, good morning, and went on their way. And Winston Churchill stood at the edge of the cliff and looked across at the French coast opposite. I thought that was really rather odd, but it's what he did. Then he went away again, and actually it was part of a historic ruse, really. He wanted it reported back to Germany that he was looking at Calais when we were going to land in Normandy, and it was reported. So that bit of trickery worked.
Women played such an important part, didn't they, in the war, Wesley, and of course including our late Queen at the time, Princess Elizabeth.
Nearly 500,000 were enlisted in both the ATS that Princess Elizabeth was in, the Wrens and the WAAF, the women's versions of the services. And I think 1 million women came on the workforce, and they were a large number of the people working in munitions factories. So the war couldn't have been won without women. And Princess Elizabeth was, I think, the first female member of the royal family actually to serve in uniform. And actually, Princess Anne wore the same uniform on Monday, and perhaps will wear it again later today. And but that day she was sort of off duty, so she was on the balcony with her parents. But then, so an amazing thing had happened in the household, which was that 2 of her cousins had been imprisoned at Auschwitz. So Viscount Lascelles, the king's nephew, and John Elphinstone, the Queen's nephew, a Bowes-Lyon, had both flown in.
Was that Auschwitz or
I said Colditz. I'm so sorry,
yeah.
A terrible error.
Yeah.
They'd both been imprisoned at Colditz, the famous prisoner of war camp, and they flew back 2 days before VE Day. And Princess Elizabeth records in her diary that they were just the same, that they were kind of unchanged. Wow. So on the night of VE Day, they persuade their parents, Elizabeth and Margaret, that they should go out among the crowds. And among the people is Margaret Rhodes, the Queen's cousin, and she says it was a Cinderella moment for Elizabeth. Elizabeth gave an interview in which she said that it was perhaps the most remarkable day of her life, and they were out till 1 o'clock.
It's extraordinary.
Yes.
These were the princesses.
Yes. Yeah.
In amongst the crowd, I mean, a security risk that would, raise the hairs on the back of the neck of any of those who had the job of protecting her. But she said, didn't she? She knew they wouldn't be recognised. People would be too busy celebrating.
Yes, I think because actually they did this 4 times. They did it on VE Day, they did it on the 9th, and then they did it on VJ Day and the day after VJ Day when they were recognised. But she actually briefly pulled her cap down, but one of the other people said, no, you can't go out, you're not properly dressed if your cap
So she had to put her cap back,
But they conquered, they sang the Lambeth Walk, they went through the parks, and actually they were outside Buckingham Palace, and made calls where we want the King. And so a message was sent in, and then so the King and Queen came out after midnight and appeared.
And we will see the King and Queen, of course, here at Westminster Abbey later for that commemorative service. But vivid scenes you paint. Well, 99-year-old Royal Navy veteran and D-Day hero Thomas Cuthbert was just 18 on D-Day, stationed on a landing barge off the coast of Normandy. His incredibly dangerous mission was to refuel other vessels whilst under heavy fire. And Thomas joins us now alongside his daughter Carol. They're attending the service at Westminster Abbey today. And sitting alongside them, Gavin and Stacey star Larry Lamb. Now, we might be asking ourselves, Larry Lamb, what are you doing here today? You're taking part in an incredible recreation at Horse Guards Parade, aren't you?
I am, yeah. We're recreating a little scene, top secret scene from Dad's Army. So that's been really interesting. You know, working in a group of 10 of us there are, and all dressed in the regalia and getting ready to entertain their 12,500 people, I think.
Yeah.
So it's a great big show, and it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it already. We just rehearsed yesterday.
It's wonderful to have you with us
Thank
this morning.
you.
What would you say, Larry Lamb, to someone amazing, remarkable who was there, Thomas Cuthbert?
A great big thank you, because, you know, my family were all involved in it. My mother was in the Land Army, uncle in the Navy, my dad and his brother in the Air Force. So I'm sort of happy to be able to meet somebody who was actually there, and because all of my family have moved on. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I really do.
We really do, Thomas. And you're going to be here at Westminster Abbey inside for the service. How important is that to you?
Well, it's very important because it reminds me of all the people what's been lost during the war, and my family and everyone. And I'm doing it for everybody. I'm appreciating for all the people who's helped to keep this going, to remind people in the country of people who gave up their lives.
We want to pay tribute to you, but typically veterans want to pay tribute to those who didn't make it.
Yes.
And you must be thinking today of those at the Normandy landings where you were on a refuelling barge, you call it a floating bomb, but there were many people that you saw, of course, who never came home, weren't there? What are your thoughts about them today?
Well, you can't imagine the people, and I appreciate everyone what gave up their lives. It must be horrible for the families who's lost people. You can't imagine it.
No. We can only imagine it, can't we, really, the horror. And, of course, you were there, Thomas.
Yes.
You must have seen terrible scenes.
Yes.
There was also, before you served in the Royal Navy, just as a teenager, you were younger than any of my sons at the time of the Second World War. But at the age of 17, you were an air raid precautions messenger. So you were sort of working to protect people here, weren't you, back home? But you saw a terrible civilian disaster, didn't you, that happened at Bethnal Green Tube Station when there was a stampede and 173 women and children lost their lives.
Yes. 62 children was out of that 173. They say that it is the worst disaster in England for civilians to die. I lost four, excuse me,
four loved ones, weren't there?
Relatives in that. That was my wife's mother and sister, and my cousin and aunt.
Yeah.
There's four people died in that disaster.
Absolutely shocking. And your wife, who sadly is no longer with us, but your wife might have been there that night.
Yes, it was, because why she wasn't there, I said to her that night, let's go to the pictures and have a good night.
Yeah.
And being in the pictures, and they didn't let us know there's anything going on during the war.
But that saved her life,
that night,
didn't it?
And the time we got, I said, all right, you want to go? And she said, yeah, she wants to go and see her mum and the family. But when she got home, her dad said that her mum and sister had gone down to the tube and had never been down to the tube before.
Because it was thought to be safe as an air raid shelter, and then they died in that stampede.
It was down the tube.
So you must be thinking of them today as well.
It is.
Close.
Well, she was only 12, and I keep on thinking of it because it must have been bad, because when I first come across it, I was in the messenger in the ARP, and I had to go, as you know, to see what was happening, because they had lost contact on the phone to the station. And I thought, when I saw the people being brought out, I thought they'd have fainted. But I didn't realise that amount of people had passed away.
Thomas, I mean, you saw terrible things during the war, and it is remarkable that this disaster in the air raid shelter where those women and children were supposed to be safe was obviously one of those terrible moments. Tell us today about being here with your family. I know your daughter Carol is here alongside us, and you've got grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Just your thoughts today. Victory in Europe. It must have been an extraordinary moment when you found out.
Yes. It was a joy to know that the war was over. And the amount of people was celebrating.
Did you celebrate?
Yeah. We only had a little drop.
Yeah. Yeah. And Carol, your father is an incredible human being. Yeah. And every single one of the veterans is so full of humility. It's not about them, but, I mean, the scenes that your father has witnessed and survived are extraordinary, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And it's just, as with a lot of things, it's just the luck of the draw, whether you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and if you're lucky enough to come home and survive.
Larry, you're taking part in this tribute to people, not just like Thomas, you know, and his comrades in the Navy, but of course the Home Guard, Dad's Army. Yeah. It's such an incredible day. I mean, I don't think we can even imagine the relief that must have been felt when the war was over in Europe.
Well, I lived with my nan for quite a long time, and, you know, when I was very young, and the war absolutely overshadowed them. They still lived the war, you know. I can remember my uncle, who was living there, five years after the war, I served him a cup of tea, and it was a bit weak. And his response was, "What, has the tea boat gone down?" And that was it. So it was everything related to the war.
Yes.
Even, 5-10 years afterwards. Yeah. It was, it was a huge shadow to live in. And we as little boys, we still sort of played...
War games.
Yeah, war games.
Yeah. And you were born in the shadow of the war,
I was.
weren't you?
Born at the end of... I was born at the end of 47. So, it was we were still being rationed, You couldn't just go and buy stuff. You had to have ration cards. So it was a huge thing that rolled on and rolled on. And here we are today, 80 years on. And I remember the celebrations back then after the war, the fact that it was from my family. It was a special day, VE Day.
Well, Thomas, it's thanks to you and your comrades and those who didn't come home and those who survived that we are all here today to celebrate victory in Europe. Thank you so much for your service.
And thank you for having me to celebrate.
It's so lovely to see you again, because we first met 6 years ago, didn't we? After you'd been flirting with Melania Trump. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You came into Good Morning Britain to talk to us about it. Honestly, Thomas, it's so wonderful to be with you here today.
Your hands are nice cold like mine.
We can keep each other warm this morning.
Yeah,
Lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
Celebrating me to ask me to come and celebrate for the
It's our
people,
honour.
the honour of the people. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
We all know we've been talking all morning about how special today is, VE Day. But for our next guest, it's extra special because today Linda Jones is celebrating her, it says here, 80th birthday. Are you sure it's not the 60th birthday? 80th birthday. Isn't that amazing? Because she was born just as Winston Churchill delivered his speech at 3 in the afternoon on VE Day, announcing the end of the war.
Well, Linda has a remarkable story to tell us. Her father, John Warren, a bomber pilot, took an unauthorised flight from Belgium to Norfolk to see his newborn daughter as Britain celebrated the end of the war.
And Linda joins us now alongside Harry Clark, former Army helicopter engineer, who we also know as the winner of the Traitors, and they're going to be attending tonight's VE Day celebration party at the Royal Albert Hall. Tell us about that VE Day, your mum Heather, giving birth to you while Churchill was making his speech, and she was a bit annoyed about it, wasn't she?
She was a little bit, because apparently I was overdue. I don't know how long overdue, but probably be a few days. She said if you'd have been born on time, I could have been out partying. Oh. Because of, you know, late. I obviously waited for the sirens to stop, didn't I?
And then you thought, now's the moment.
And now's the moment. The war's finished.
What a day to have a birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
We should say, how does it feel having a birthday today?
It is amazing. It's nice I was born on the last day of the war, but to me, it's the way I feel about those who served, those who lost their lives, and things that Dad did, you know, that help us to get to where we are, to win the war.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is an emotional thing to think.
For 80 years, every year, your birthday has been on VE Day.
Yeah.
And so you, of course, you'll have known that. At different times in your life, has VE Day had a different significance? Has it become a bigger deal, do you think? Is it something you're more kind of conscious of and celebrating as time has passed?
Yes, I think the biggest one was when I was 50. We had a really party and everybody was dressed up, you know, in army. And there was one of our friends, he was dressed up as, I don't know what you would have called them then, a spiv, you know, black suit, fake cigarette, and he was trying to sell me mother some black stockings.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, that was good. Well, obviously, 5 years ago with COVID, it wasn't quite the same.
Not quite the same. And listen, you've brought something in with you, haven't you? Your dad's helmet. So tell us, you know, what this was, because he was right in the midst of it all and, you know, suffered some damage to the plane and was actually lucky to come out of it, wasn't he?
Yeah, he used to... Well, when he was 19, when he joined up, he sailed to Canada and then down to Alabama, where he trained as a pilot. And that took about 9 months. And then he was flying Mitchells. Mm-hmm. And, yes, there was one particular incident where 19 July 44, he was doing some bombing in France, because the Germans, as we know, occupied it. And he came back, and one of the engines was out, and the radio was out. And he asked one of the crew, I think it was the navigator, go along, have a look down the wheel hatch and check if the wheels are intact. Yes, they were. So they said, OK, lads, we're going to make it. And because as they approached the English coast, there was a Spitfire on each wing. And, of course, they made a safe landing. As they landed, apparently the plane swerved onto the grass.
Oh, my gosh.
They get out quick. And he's sent off to the commanding officer. And Dad thought he was going to get praise for good landing. But the commanding officer just said, in the briefing room, Warren, you're back in the sky this afternoon.
God. Oh, so it was straight back out there?
Straight back out.
No
and then on the day you were born, he actually went off on an unauthorised trip in his plane to come back to visit you.
Apparently, when the war was over, they were told when they were in Belgium, oh, you've got the day off. So he must have got hold of a navigator.
He went out for a ride.
Got hold of a plane and flew back to see me.
Isn't that an amazing...
And he landed in Norfolk, and somehow, I don't know how they got back up to Kendal. And he rang the maternity home because he'd heard that maybe I was about to be born. And he rang the maternity home and he asked. And the nurse who answered the phone said, yes, you've got a daughter.
Aww.
I've got her in my arms.
What a special thing to then congratulate. Harry, I know you're going to be speaking to Linda, among others, tonight at the Royal Albert Hall. I mean, today is... It's just so important. It's such a significant day, isn't it, for people to think about, you know, what happened all those years ago and where we are today because of it.
I mean, I've got the best job in the world. Like, we've already spent time together speaking now, and just as a generation, we can learn so much from our veterans and the people that live that life. And I always say, like, people can think what they want, but it's not a glorification of war. It's a celebration of what that generation gave up for us.
100-year-old Dorothia Baron is one of them, a former Wren, officially known as the Women's Royal Naval Service, who played a crucial role in the Royal Navy, taking on a wide range of duties that were previously exclusively done by men. Dorothia's role as a visual signaller was vital in watching over troops training ahead of the Normandy landings. And her pure determination to serve in the Wrens led to her faking her own height in order to meet the requirements. And that determination hasn't faltered to this day. Because Dorothea is here, you're going to be... you've been attending memorial services already, haven't you, Dorothea?
Yes.
In Holland. Yes, over in Holland.
The Dutch people were lovely. They were welcoming. They were so friendly. You know, you go to other countries, they're a bit snippy, GB, but the Dutch were superb. Oh, we made lots of friends there.
Now, the person you're talking to right here, of course, is Matt Goss from Bros. Lovely to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And you're sort of cuddling up, aren't
and I'm
you?
so
we've been
pleased
cuddling
to
since
see
we met.
him.
Yeah, I'm pleased to see you too, darling.
Can you, Dorothea, you met Matt when you heard him play his music. He's done a single to mark Victory in Europe Day.
Yes, it was the debut of it.
Yes, it was,
yeah.
For a wonderful charity called the Not Forgotten Charity. So it is lovely to see you both here today. You've got a sort of special bond.
We do like each other.
On.
We do.
Yes.
She's going to teach me yoga, aren't you?
We just gelled.
I love that. So we thought it was a wonderful opportunity to bring you together today. Dorothea, we need to talk about how you managed to join the Wrens, because you've just made a face. You had to
bringing up naughty things.
Naughty memories. Now, I wonder would you mind just for a moment standing up next to me? Because I understand that you faked your height.
Yes.
Now, I am 5'4", and you needed to be 5'3", didn't you, in order to join? So what did you do in order to fake your height?
I cut cardboard shapes at the size of my heels.
Yeah.
And I put those in my shoes. And I pulled my hair up, stuck it up in a bun, and made it as tall as I could.
And they said, yes, you're in.
Well, no, not quite. They kept saying, are you sure you're 5'3"? I said, very nearly. And I was stretching away. I was determined it was going to be the Wrens or nothing.
Well, and we're so grateful that you joined up. Do you want to have another seat? I don't want to keep you standing. And we'll wrap you up in a blanket because we need to keep you safe.
Keep me warm.
And keep you warm at 100 years old. Dorothea, tell us what your sort of most significant memory of Victory in Europe Day, the moment that you knew all of your effort had come to peace.
When I was on a train travelling down from the north of Scotland down to Bournemouth.
It's a long journey.
to go down there we'd done our job up top and we hadn't realised. But nobody was ever told anything. Ever. You never discussed what you did. You just swore an oath of secrecy and everything was secrecy. You accepted people at their face value.
Because you were involved in training the troops who took part in the Normandy landings, but you didn't even know that that's what you were training them for.
Keeping them healthy and fit and making sure they hadn't drowned in the sea up there. Yes, we were... They had a big troop ship and they were teaching the sailors how to remove groups of men into small motorboats. And they were boats which they had asked the British public to donate, little holiday boats. And then they were teaching the troops about jumping out onto the beaches. Now, the beaches of Normandy are very sandy and soft and shifty. So some brilliant person devised this stuff which they nicknamed mulberry. And it was little bits of rubber and metal joined together which were rolled out in rolls so that they would stand the weight of troops and stand the weight of lorries being driven off to go into Europe.
It's
Incredible. Every little cog, you know, fitted together. And it wasn't till years later that I discovered that's what we've been doing.
And that's what you were part of, and we thank you for that. It's extraordinary. Dorothea, what happened after victory in Europe was declared and then the war was finally over? What did you do?
They simply came to us and said, all right, you can keep your uniforms. We don't need you anymore. Goodbye. Oh, here are a few clothing coupons, and here are a few food coupons. Go home. Well, lots of people hadn't got homes to go to. They'd be bombed, destroyed, especially Londoners and Midlanders. And my mother had been widowed and had remarried. And she'd sold our family home and bought a place in Norfolk where they were. And she said, oh, I've got you a room at Mrs. Ware's house and she'll do you bed and breakfast. I thought, not bloody likely. And so Andrew and I were very good friends then. I said, come on, we're going to get married.
Love it. Oh, well, honestly, Dorothy, we could listen to you all morning.
Sorry, you probably will.
No, and I will. I'll carry on listening to you. All our viewers would love to carry on listening to you. But I just want to ask Matt what viewers might be thinking as they're listening to Dorothea and her indomitable spirit.
Yeah, I think this is why I think you and I are just captivated, because discretion, strength, humour, resilience. And I just think when I met Dorothea the first time, we ignored everybody and we just chatted like this for a good hour.
We just took to each other
really
immediately.
Did. And Dorothea's generation, my grandfather's generation, just inspires me deeply, and I feel like it's an integral part of this country. And I just want to be part of that energy, and I respect Dorothea so deeply and what she's been through, and her generation. And we can learn a lot from Dorothea's generation for sure.
Yeah. I hope you feel like your contribution is valued, Dorothea.
What I feel so desperately is, I am English.
Yeah.
I am British, but I am English.
Yes, and that's okay. I agree.
Yes.
I think we must be allowed to feel prideful, and I think sometimes the rhetoric is kind of manipulated. But it's really, really important to feel proud of our country. That Big Ben during the war was dark, 6 years. No lights, just candles, and just bonfires in the streets when the war came to an end, and just that freedom. Just so much respect to you,
And that's what you will be marking today at Westminster Abbey. Thank you, Dorothea. We are so proud of you.
Well, thank you, dear.
It's an honour to talk to
for
you.
letting me freeze this morning.
Right, we're going to cover you up, take you back inside